for the notion of crawl, walk, run. And it's kind of like, what do you have to do to start crawling, then walking, and then run? And then a couple of months ago, I was in a workshop where someone put their hand up and said, I think we need to wake up before we even get to the stage of crawling. You're kind of like, okay, so there's a step before you even start crawling, which is someone somewhere inside the organization has to have that aha moment.
Welcome to Data and AI Mastery, the podcast where we bring you cutting-edge insights, practical advice, and inspiring stories from the leaders shaping the future of data and AI across the globe. I'm your host, Raoul-Gabriel Urma, founder of Cambridge Spark, the leader in transformational data and AI upskilling, career development, and progression. In each episode, I will be diving into real-world case studies of companies harnessing the power of AI to drive innovation, reduce costs, and create new business opportunities. So whether you're an aspiring data scientist, AI engineer, or seasoned executive, this show is designed to give you the tools and knowledge to stay ahead in a world where data is transforming every aspect of business. Stay ahead, stay inspired, stay masterful. Welcome to Data and AI Mastery. Hey Matt, good to see you. How's it going?
It's great. Thanks for having me here today, Ralph. Good to meet you.
So, hey Matt, what a fascinating career you've had. So, Nokia, UBS, now over 10 years at Endava, where you're the CTO. So that's really exciting. So maybe to kick us off, can you tell us what the CTO role entails at Endava?
That's a great question. I mean, whenever a CTO walks into a room, 9 times out of 10, someone says something like, my laptop doesn't work. And you're kind of like, oh, really? No, but inside of Endava, what does the CTO role entail? So I'm a member of the executive team. I report directly to John Cottrell, who's the CEO. And effectively, I wear a number of different hats as the CTO. So I am responsible for our internal IT systems and platforms. So I have a CIO who works for me. And therefore, I'm like every other person who's probably listening to this podcast going, what's the impact on AI and technology on our internal platforms and tools, et cetera, et cetera. The other part that I'm responsible for is, as an IT services company, what is the skills and capabilities that we need to have available to be able to provide a service to our clients. So that can be everything from how many Java developers do we need? What skills do they need? What Python developers, et cetera, et cetera. And then the third part of it really is around proposition development and how can we demonstrate to clients from a commercial perspective that we know what we're talking about, that we can help them solve the problems that they're trying to challenge. So multifaceted role, but as you said, I've been here for 10 years. I joined as a simple enterprise architect and have kind of worked my way through to today. And the last point to make is I also see myself as an ambassador for the 8,000 plus engineers that we have inside the organization and really want to kind of be an advocate for them and their voice because we're a very passionate engineering-based organization.
That's wonderful. And you've named two of my favorite programming languages, so we're off to a great start. So I guess maybe to kick us off, I was going to ask you the question, who has the ownership of the AI agenda in a large organization like Endava? Sounds like it's you, the CTO?
Yes. So I can talk about probably the most boring part of it, which is the kind of like, what's the governance structure of it? And then I can talk about the more exciting part of it. So we're a publicly traded company. So we have a board, as many organizations do. There are many committees that surround that board, one of which is the Control and Policy Committee, or the CPC. And they would own things like our cybersecurity policy and those type of things. What we did around 12 months ago, 18 months ago, was myself, our legal team, and a couple of other people wrote an AI policy. So what was Endava's position on AI? Did we expect from people who were going to use it? Threats, risks, those type of things. So a very comprehensive policy. And within that policy, we suggested to the Control and Policy Committee that an AI committee was created, which brought people from across our organization. So not just me as the CTO, but someone from the legal team, someone from the finance team, someone from our commercial teams.
How did you select those people? Like, why it sounds like it's cross-functional, which is really interesting.
We went cross-functional because at that time when we were creating that policy and the general philosophy, back to my comment about ChatGPT kind of being the dinosaur moment with the meteor streaking through the air, we've decided that we're very much going to lean into everything that AI can do. And therefore, from our perspective, it's like this isn't about just the back end functions of Endava embracing AI. It was about the fact that actually it changes the way that we talk to our clients about what our propositions are. It changes the way we deliver those propositions to our client. And therefore, when we looked at that AI committee, the decision was, well, we need to bring those different voices into the room to be able to get their perspective. Now, what that committee does in reality is, it meets on a regular cadence. And what it's doing is it's creating the environment which allows people to experiment with AI technologies, not using client data, being very secure and safe about how they do it. But when we then turn around and say, this is a tool that we believe everybody in the organization should use, or this is an approach that we should use with our clients, the AI committee is responsible for approving that technology once it's gone through a security review, once it's gone through a kind of like legal review, et cetera, et cetera. So that committee is very much the governor within the Endava organization. It's great. What it does mean is, when people come to us and go, hey, I've got the latest tool, or, the endless stream of people coming with new technology, there's a very direct place that we can go to get that approval. So that's the governance side of things. The other part I would then say is, but how do we then become an AI native organization? Because you're not going to do it by having a committee at the top going, go and be AI native. You actually need to have it. And underneath the covers, we have a program internally, which we refer to Keystone, which is looking at every single part of our business, saying, what does it mean to become AI native? So where are we today? How do we see AI changing that particular role or activity? And what do we need to do to be able to move our people, our propositions, everything towards that AI native vision? And that's done underneath the Keystone program. Right, and to round it all off and bring it back to your first point, I'm the chair of the AI committee at the delegation of John, the CEO, and I'm the overall exec sponsor for the Keystone program within the organization.
Fantastic. You beat me to it. I was going to ask who chairs that committee, right? Ultimately. So that's really interesting because some organizations, they've appointed a chief AI officer, that has the mandate about the AI strategy and make it happen. But we're seeing challenges of this model too, right? One can argue that AI is everyone's concern. It's not the one person, one team. It's cross-functional, like you point out. So I find it really interesting as a model that you have a committee set up, cross-functional stakeholder, and you as the CTO, you're ultimately the chair of the committee to kind of like bring all the voices together. So if that's the case, Matt, could you talk us through a little bit, how is that committee setting targets for, AI adoption or, even better, value creation from AI? How does that work out?
So the committee doesn't take that responsibility. It's a lot there to ensure the policies are in place, that everybody understands the risks and the benefits of doing things, and that's the responsibility of the committee. The Keystone program, of which I'm the exec sponsor, is then when we get down to the kind of like nuts and bolts of what you're talking about, which is, what's the adoption, how are we doing it, how's it rolling out, et cetera, et cetera. Now, on that point, it's all well and good having someone like myself sitting at the top of an organization going, well, we should be adopting AI technology. It's going to be hugely impactful on our business. It's going to do all of these efficiencies. It's then a good old fashioned change process. So how do you make that happen? So what we did was, again, about 15, 16 months ago now, we decided to invest in ChatGPT Enterprise for everybody inside of the organization. And the way that we rolled that out was using something called the Champions Network. So what you would go and do is you'd go and find the person in the finance department who was passionate about using AI, could see the benefits of doing it, and then training them along, using our people, using our skills and our expertise, but also working very closely with OpenAI. And so we built out this Champions Network in all of the different parts of the organization. But again, even that wasn't enough. What we then discovered was the fact that, you'll go and find that, Jill in accounts has used ChatGPT in a way that no one was thinking about beforehand. And then everyone's kind of like staring over their shoulder going, how did you do that? That's really clever. And what we did is we purposefully went to go and find those people within our organization. And we call those people the AI heroes. And they're really kind of like, if you like, the influencers, the people within the organization that other people listen to. So you need that kind of like groundswell from the bottom up in terms of people wanting to use it, being able to see the benefit of it, plus the top levels support. Put all of that together, and where we are right now is, I think we probably have about 85 to 90% utilization of ChatGPT on a daily basis across the organization. We have several hundred GPTs written, and for most people, they can't actually think about doing their job without first going into ChatGPT and using everything that's available to them on a daily basis.
Wow, so many nuggets to unpack, Matt. So I love this. I love this concept of AI champions network because, speaking of your clients, it seems to be the model is adopted, is identify those change agents in your organization, those people that are, more keen than others, train them up so they can kind of cascade the sort of culture internally. But you've described something unique here, which I hadn't heard before, which is the AI hero. So for the audience, can you help understand how did you identify those AI champions in the first place? Like, how did that work out? The kind of bootstrapping the network, and then who gets to be an AI hero?
Champions kind of emerged from what would happen with a traditional change program, where you would go to, the leader of a department or a team and say, who within your team is interested in doing this? Here's the opportunity. You might have heard about getting training. This is an opportunity for you to work with us and OpenAI to develop your skills. And you will usually get people who will volunteer within that position. But invariably, the people who get picked tend to be the more senior people inside of the teams. And you're kind of like, okay, that kind of makes sense because they're the people who are going to think about the nuances or the problems of rolling it out. Where the AI heroes come into it is really this idea that as much as you are trying to push something downwards and you're trying to, model the way in which you want people to use AI, when you see someone using AI in a truly transformative way, you want to celebrate it. You want to lift it up. You want to show other people the art of the possible and a thing you've never done beforehand. So rather than that just turning into a kind of, the champions would report on good use cases, we actually wanted to lean into it, lift those people up and go, hey, look, you've got Bogdan in Romania, or you've got a Federico in Bogota who is doing something completely transformative, and they sit amongst you. They sit in your team. You can go and have a coffee with them. You can go and sit next to them on the desk, and you can go and see how they're using it. So for us, it was that kind of like different ways of breaking away from a kind of structured way of deploying AI and embracing a more ground up organic way of rolling out the technology. We've got 8,000 engineers inside the organization. They tend to be curious. They tend to want to know how to use a piece of technology. So maybe we're predisposed to being better able to identify who those heroes are. But equally, and again, to have a long monologue, the biggest and first mover users within our organization who successfully modeled champions and AI heroes was in fact our legal team. And our legal team are literally the vanguards and the leading lights in terms of how AI can be used to transform their jobs.
Love it. That's fascinating, and I like the point you make that clearly Endava has already a culture of innovation, engineering mindset, curiosity. So it sounds like those attributes have been really helpful to speed up adoption, maybe more so than other organizations, right?
Yeah, I mean, we did some research recently with IDC. And it kind of thankfully backed up the conversations that I tend to have with kind of like senior leaders and then different people within an organization. And it basically said the more senior you are within an organization, the more you could see what were the benefits of deploying AI technology within an organization. So, effectively the C-suite of an organization were kind of like bought in to the promise of what could be delivered and were wanting organizations to adopt it. But as soon as you drop below the C-suite and as you go down inside of an organization, the trust in the technology and the view that it could be transformative rapidly drops off. You're right, it's not an easy problem to solve.
Now, Matt, I'd love to take you back to the point you made, right? So did I get this right? You said there's been sort of 80 to 90% sort of active usage or adoption of ChatGPT since you went enterprise. That's great. You invested, in this big sort of change management program with champions, heroes, and so on. So can you walk us back maybe, the day, I assume you had to make the investment case, right? We're going to spend millions on ChatGPT licenses. And I assume the board, your CEO, what's the ROI? Why should I spend all of that money? Can you walk us through back to those days a little bit? And what are you saying today, I guess?
It was very interesting because full credit to John. He is an advocate and a visionary in terms of understanding what is the potential impact of AI being deployed inside the organization. And he was in the same meetings with investors and clients and others being told that Endava was, fundamentally going to go out of business because AI was going to come and do our job. I think where he was at the point that the business case for deploying ChatGPT Enterprise came along was what I would call the traditional clipboard and pen model, which was, okay, so you're telling me that I'm going to spend this amount of money per person, per month, et cetera. How much more productive are they going to be? How are we going to measure people? How are we going to understand that these things are impactful, et cetera, et cetera? And basically what I did when I wrote the business case is I did two things. I used ChatGPT to help me write the business case. So the model of rollout, the financial, when were we going to pay the different costs? How was this going to go? What was it going to look like over a 2-year period? What was that as an impact on our internal costs, et cetera. I use ChatGPT extensively to look at spreadsheets, build the graphs, and effectively build the entire business case for me.
And how was that experience?
Well, I mean, we're talking about ChatGPT 3.5 and early versions of 4. So it was rudimentary. It was occasionally like wrestling with a snake in a bag, but we got there in the end. That was kind of like the mechanics of how do I think this is, what's the impact on it? And I think there were two things that came out of it, and hopefully the second one was more impactful on John's thinking. So number one was I basically went from the perspective of we already pay for a lot of coffee in all of our offices. We've got nice offices, nice coffee machines. What I'm effectively advocating for is one coffee for everyone in the office once a day. Because when you break down the cost of what is ChatGPT Enterprise over a month and you look at it, it's the cost of a coffee in one of our offices every day. So it's kind of like, think about this as like one more coffee, which, was probably a terrible mistake, but I'm a CTO, I'm not a chief salesperson. But the second thing, which was in the business case when I spoke through it with John, was around the part of the challenge we have is AI is going to enable something new that we've never measured in the past. So yes, I could give you how much quicker can I produce a PowerPoint if I use AI, but that's not really the story. What the story is actually it can help me research my clients. It can help me give a level and depth of response, which I can't do or would take me a lot more time because I've got to go off and I've got to do all of this research, or I'd give the job to someone else to do, et cetera, et cetera. So I focus less on the individual productivity improvements and more on how can you enable someone to do something that they couldn't do beforehand. And to take that kind of like story arc narrative to where we are today, recently ChatGPT Enterprise has enabled connectors, and connectors can connect to SharePoint and they can connect to Teams and they can connect to your inbox and do all of these type of things. So those connectors, they all go through our AI committee. So we make sure that everybody's comfortable with us using them, et cetera, et cetera. But now I can go into ChatGPT and I can ask a question about my inbox. I can ask a question about my Teams conversations. And guess what? I get a message from John a couple of weeks ago, which was basically, these connectors are completely game changing. I've just done a job that has taken me 15 minutes that would have taken me days to complete. And
That's what you want to hear.
I'm kind of like, okay, my work here is done.
Yeah, that's great. When your boss tells you you've just changed my life, that's always good. Oh, I love that story. Matt, do you mind if I unpack a little bit? Because it's quite rich of really good nuggets. I guess what I'm hearing typically when it comes to measuring ROI, there's sort of the horizontal productivity. So everybody in every role is now using a tool like ChatGPT, and you kind of like infer that, you know, they'll be more productive because meeting notes, emails, connection. But it tends to be really difficult to measure bottom line impact because it's just so widespread across the organization. It's, how to attribute, I guess, real dollar. Now, what I'm also hearing now is actually there's maybe more of a focus on verticalized AI. How do you reimagine the legal function, the sales function, or how do you think about new customer delight through, new products? How important is that, do you think, in a business case? Let's say you're a CTO in another organization and they have to convince the CEO. What advice would you give? And how do you think about this idea of maybe more verticalized AI, still within your.
So a lot of the examples that I've talked about are us doing AI to ourselves. Because I have the responsibility for all of the internal platforms and enabling people to do their jobs. What you're talking about fundamentally mirrors the conversations we are having with our clients, which is, you'll go and talk to an insurance company and they'll say, we know that we have lots of manual processes. In fact, we're not even entirely sure we understand what our business process is. But what we do know is it takes 4 days to pay out a insurance claim in this particular market, et cetera, et cetera. And within there, when we're looking at, okay, so how can you deploy AI technology for that client to enable them to do precisely as you said, which is to, reimagine an entire department or a business process within the organization. Then you're kind of in this world where you're kind of like, to your original point, what are you measuring? Okay, so then guess what? We used to have these conversations when we used to talk about agile delivery. What is the value to the client? What is the value stream analysis? What's the input to the process? At what point is value, if that's in air quotes, released to people, et cetera, et cetera? And then it's looking at, and guess what? We use AI to help us do this to our clients. So we're using all of the tools that I've provided through internal technology to enable people to do it. But what we're then looking at going is, well, what's the architecture that supports you? Is there, is this do you need an agentic solution to this problem? Do you need an agent space or an equivalent to go and be able to do that particular workflow? Could you reimagine a business process entirely using agents and with a human only really providing supervision over a process? What's interesting about that conversation is when you start going down that route, you find fewer and fewer clients who are really ready to embrace that level of change. So they understand the potential and they understand hey, yes, I get that we could get there. And then there's a lot of backpedaling very quickly in terms of, but we're not there yet. We haven't adopted enough other kind of like use of AI. Our systems are too immature. We don't know where our data is, et cetera, et cetera. So then you kind of like take one step back and you're like, right, how are we going to eat this elephant? Well, step one, let's sort out data governance. Let's look at where your data is inside your organization. Let's look at your business processes. So yeah, that verticalization route that you highlight, those are the conversations that we're having with our clients. And again, just to make this go full circle, guess what? We are having to reimagine how you deliver software systems because, traditionally we've really lent into distributed agile at scale. a team working on solving a problem would be 7 plus or minus 2 people using an agile methodology, being Java developers or testers or whatever it might be. Well, guess what? We are now having to think about that, what verticalization of what is SDLC when you have agents, when you have all of these different things available to you.
Yeah, great. I'd love to talk about agent shortly, but if I play this back, it's really some good nuggets, right? Because successful organizations tend to practice what they preach. And in this case, you've invested in AI internally into the platform, equipping your workforce with the right skills, using AI as a thought partner, and you're able to support your clients accordingly. So that's really powerful. So I think that's great to hear that. And I'm also hearing that when it comes to verticalized sort of use case with AI, there's a notion of you just need to start walking before you can run. So it sounds like, there's still quite a lot of work needed in fundamental infrastructure, governance, data infrastructure, your pipeline, have that already before the business can go and integrate AI to it.
We're not the first people to use the phrase by any stretch of the imagination. So the notion of crawl, walk, run, and it's kind of like, what do you have to do to start crawling, then walking, and then run? And then a couple of months ago, I was in a workshop where someone put their hand up and said, I think we need to wake up before we even get to the stage of crawling. You're kind of like, okay, so there's a step before you even start crawling, which is someone somewhere inside the organization has to have that aha moment. So then again, we're back to those senior leaders within the organization who, someone at the top has to go, aha, I think that this is a thing that we should be looking at. And then that's the kind of like waking up moment before you go on the crawl, walk, run.
I love that. I'll reuse that, Mac. So how do you get that exec to have this aha wake up moment, especially maybe traditional industry? Is there a trick to get people to realize the importance of what's happening?
So interestingly for me, just over a month ago, I was invited to go and speak at a CEO conference for a PE firm. So their portfolio CEOs were at an event and went with John to go and talk about AI in general. And the single biggest thing that came out of that conversation, both when we were doing the presentation and then afterwards when talking to them one-on-one, was people want to understand what's the practicalness of what is being told to them on a daily basis. So, there is a hose pipe of information that is being directed at senior leaders across the industry. If you're a retail CEO, someone's telling you how AI is going to disrupt your business. If you're an insurer, someone's telling you how AI is going to solve your business. What people are interested in is, well, what's the practical next step? And their aha moment is going, I can see other people have gone on this journey. So it's not a completely fruitless exercise where, it's like the NFT revolution that lasted for all of 6 months. It's kind of, this is something that is real. I can see, and I've heard a story. I'm speaking to someone who knows that this has had an impact within a business. And then it's kind of focusing on what's the real thing that's like, where's the itch that needs to be scratched? And again, another conversation last week with the CEO, and it started off with a conversation about, well, can you come and talk to our developers about how they can use AI to be better? And we may need to use Endava to give us burst capacity, et cetera, et cetera. So a very traditional come and talk to us about that. 15 minutes later, we're talking about how a lot of their supplier contracts are shared on SharePoint and how many people are involved in pulling those documents down, reading the contract terms, then putting that data into Excel, then trying to mine it for better, supplier deals, et cetera, et cetera. And you're like, well, it's unstructured data. You could point AI at that, you can consume it, ingest it, and you could use natural language to say, how much do I pay to supplier X every year? And then that was that CEO's aha moment, because they're like, oh, I was thinking about it over here as this particular problem, but you've just told me that this problem, which I thought was fairly intractable or would require a big program of work to solve, how there might be a quicker way to arrive at that point. So it's the same thing as ever. What's the business problem? What problem are you trying to solve? Forget AI. Right, now how can we use AI to help you solve that business problem?
Super, super. So, the aha moment tends to happen from learning from peers and use cases that, you can relate back to your business, but important proven use cases.
Exactly. the worst thing in the world, and it happens to me because people can see my name on LinkedIn and elsewhere, where someone is trying to sell you a product or a service, and you're like, "But this just sounds like hot air. I've got no way of knowing whether it's true, false, etc., etc." And guess what? You're the fifth person today who sent me an email or tried to ring my phone to sell me something. That's how CEOs feel. They're overwhelmed. What they want to know is this person's done it, and that sounds like they know what they're talking about.
Absolutely. But wouldn't you say there's a balance between, wait and see can be punishing? Blockbuster, I guess, is a famous story, right? Like you wait and see and then game over. So how do you balance out? I just want to wait, to see what the ROI is versus I really need to get on it.
Yeah. So I use a terrible analogy for this. So you can tell me it's a terrible analogy about this.
I love analogies.
So imagine that we've invented a starship that could leave our solar system and go and explore a planet, and we've identified that that planet is the place that we want to go to, but it's going to take us 1,000 years to get there. So we invent this cryogenic technology, we freeze everybody, we put them on the spaceship, and we send them off. And it's 1,000 years until they're going to arrive at that planet. But ultimately, we know that they're going to arrive at that planet. There are some people who go, "Oh, I think we can improve that engine and we can do X and da 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 da." And 100 years later, someone invents a rocket that can get there in 500 years' time. And you're kind of like, so do I now send out the rocket that can get there in half the time to arrive at the destination, or do I just let this one carry on going, etc.? And for me, that's the problem that CEOs and C-suite executives are facing all of the time. Is I can wait, and I can see whether someone is going to invent that better rocket that's going to halve the time to enable me to get to where I'm going. My perspective on this is the longer you wait, the harder it is to catch up with your peers who are already on that particular journey. So you've got this, I've forgotten who came up with it recently, but they're saying, is AI going to replace you in your role? And the answer is no, AI isn't going to replace you in your role, but a person using AI may replace you in your role. That's how people should be thinking about their organizations, which is, if you wait because you're waiting for something to happen to go, now is the time for me to push the button and start moving on this journey, you are taking the risk that you can catch up with your peers who've already begun on that journey. So it was a terrible analogy, but it gives you this idea of, I understand why people want to wait, but I don't think it's the best advice.
I love your analogy, Matt. I'm a sci-fi fan, the three-body problem, and so on. Great, great, great one. So, Matt, I'll move you to a quick fire round of questions if you're up for it.
I am up for it. Go for it.
You know what's my favorite. So, what's a contrarian view you have in the industry?
Okay, so I'm going to be quite controversial with this one. I don't believe that any organization can finish a data warehousing project. So I've been in many, many clients and many, many industries over my 30 years where someone at one point or another will stick up their hand and go, the solution to this problem is to build a warehouse where we combine these data sources. So we have a single source of truth, and all of these wonderful benefits will emerge from having this kind of like golden warehouse that sits inside the organization. And the project starts, and the project will deliver, the first milestone and maybe even the second milestone. And then it precipitously slows down, and no one is interested in building that warehouse anymore or maintaining that warehouse anymore. And then many years later, someone else pops up and goes, well, what we need is that we need a data warehouse. So, and my contrarian view is, whilst I am an advocate of data and structure and order and governance, projects where people say we will just solve this problem by building the one true data warehouse to solve all problems, I've never seen it work in my career.
I love how specific you've used. That's really interesting. So, data warehouse is more of a journey than a destination. That's that's cool. Next question is, in the environment you're seeing, if you had a magic wand, what's like one issue you wish you could immediately solve?
So I'm going to start with the environmental impact of AI, because it's something that is at the front of at least some people's minds in terms of what's the consumption of water, what's the consumption of electricity. I read a lot of papers where people go, but you're not measuring the environmental positiveness of applying AI technology, because if someone can do a job in 1 hour as opposed to 5 hours, then that saved that amount of electricity, blah, blah, blah. But if I could wave a magic wand, it would be to solve an energy problem that relates to using data and AI as this thing that's seen as a very, very negative thing to it. And it probably comes up in every new conversation I have with someone about AI technology is what's the environmental impact. So if I could fix that, I would. And if I could have one other thing that I would like to fix is clearly the foundation models got built at a time when no one really understood the value of the things that they had placed on the internet. So whether it was books, whether it was art, whether it was music, whatever it was. So if I had a way of being able to recognize the individuals who contributed the copyrighted material to those foundation models through a micropayments network or something like that, I wish that that could happen, so that truly creative originators of content can be recognized for their contribution in something that is so transformative within our industry.
That's great reflection. Absolutely. All right, maybe a couple more personal, quick questions. Favorite programming language?
Oh, it changes over time. So I am going to say Python. I'm now going to bore you with the answer. So I started as a C developer. Actually, I started with Basic, then I did C, then I did Objective-C, then I did Swift, then I did Python, then I did Java, then I've done quite a few different programming languages. But yeah, I quite like Python.
Python is, I mean, it is the lingua franca of the AI world, so that's a great choice.
I call it an accidental language because it's not like anyone set out with the intention of making Python the de facto AI language. It just so happens to be the people who did the AI used it as their language. And it's a similar story with Objective-C. I was an Objective-C developer because I used to program web objects in NextStep computers. And then the iPhone came along and everybody wanted mobile apps and everything else, and Objective-C happened to be the language that Apple used. So I was accidentally, for a short period of time, someone who actually knew the language that all of the mobile apps were written in. But again, it was accidental. No one ever said that's the best language for programming mobile apps.
Definitely. I love that story. What was your favorite subject at school?
My favorite subject at school, rather bizarrely, my degree is in computer science and psychology. So I actually quite enjoy psychology and the study of individuals as part of that thing. So I'm going to say psychology more than computer science, because computer science was just something I could do and I didn't actually have to try very hard to do well at it. So therefore, I think I enjoyed the challenge of psychology.
That's really cool. 'Cause delivering technology transformation at scale is people, process, and technology. So I can see the blend here. That makes sense, Matt. And my last question for you, what is your favorite music genre?
Well, I'm going to go with a music genre that is derided and not very pop. So I quite like progressive rock. So I'm a big fan of the band called Marillion that have been around for like since the early 80s, and I've seen them in concert many, many times, really enjoy their music. But to be honest, I'm an equal opportunities employer when it comes to music, and I'm just as happy going to a Taylor Swift concert or listening to the latest release by Lord.
I love it. I love it. Well, Matt, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show today. I really genuinely love the conversation. Thank you.
Been awesome, and I hope I've provided some nuggets for the people in the who listen to this.
What a fantastic discussion with Matt. Generally, that was such a treat. There's so many nuggets. So there's three that comes to mind. One, we talked a bit about the business case for AI. Two, we talked about adoption in the organization, how you support that. And then three, how do you make it a wake-up call for senior leaders? So let's start with the business case. What's really interesting, about what Matt described is that they've set up an AI committee to support the governance and review the investment cases. And when it came to the investment case, Matt looked at that from a horizontal productivity point of view, so incremental improvements on an individual level, but also on a vertical level. So the really impactful use cases that benefit Endava internally and for the client. So building that capability in-house at scale was really a vital part of the business case. The second nugget was around how do you get your wider workforce, right? Like thousands and thousands of people to adopt AI tools like ChatGPT. And he described the importance of setting up a champions network that's cross-functional. So identifying those individuals that are already excited and are willing to be trained and support their colleagues. So this way you've got like a sustainable, organic adoption. And then he described this idea of some of them are going to become AI heroes and celebrated because they are the influence in the organization. So that was really, really cool. And finally, the wake-up call for executives. Really, it's about educating them through use cases that are proven, where the ROI is established, and even more so when it comes from your peers in similar industries. If a CEO knows that the CEO of a competitor, they got this massive ROI out of AI, obviously you want to get on it. So that's really powerful to have that wake-up call. So thank you, everybody. It's been such a treat. And see you on the next episode of the Data and Mastery show. And do not forget to follow, and see you later.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Data and AI Mastery. If you found value in today's discussion, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an insight from the leaders driving the future of data and AI. And if you're a data and AI leader looking to upskill your workforce with the fundamental data and AI skills to transform your business, Cambridge Spark is here to guide you every step of the way. Be sure to reach out to us on LinkedIn or on our website, cambridgespark.com. Until then, be sure to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with data, and remember, mastery comes with continued learning and action. Until next time, stay ahead, stay inspired, and stay masterful.